Hello, and welcome to Cabinet Conversations. My name is Paul Tatro, and I'm the director of Ford's Theater. If you're joining us for the first time, this is our live series exploring creativity, history, and leadership. You can learn more and explore our past programs by visiting our website at www.fords.org. Today, we welcome two wonderful friends of Ford's Theater, Judy and Dennis Shepard. Judy and Dennis Shepard have spent more than 20 years advocating for LGBTQ rights since their 21-year-old son, Matthew Shepard's 1998 abduction, attack, and murder in Laramie, Wyoming. In the aftermath of Matt's death, Judy and Dennis started the Matthew Shepard Foundation to honor his life and aspirations. They have dedicated their lives to sharing Matt's story, speaking out against hate crimes, and inspiring individuals, organizations, and communities across the globe to embrace the dignity and equality of all people. Since its formation, the Matthew Shepard Foundation has helped pioneer the country's first federal hate crimes legislation with the passing of the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act in 2009. Their work has also providing anti-hate training to 790 law enforcement officers and prosecutors since January of 2018. As parents of a child victimized by violence, Judy and Dennis bring unparalleled authenticity and relevance to the impact of hate while motivating us all to continue the fight to erase and replace hate with understanding, compassion, and acceptance. As a reminder to all our viewers, we're taking your questions on our social media platforms. Please feel free to submit those so that we may share your questions with our guests during the program. Dennis and Judy, welcome. It's so great to see you this afternoon.
Wonderful to see you, Paul. Thanks for the invitation.
Well, thank you for being with us. I want to jump right in right here and just talk about, you both experienced a tremendous loss. Could you share with us how your grief changed your views of the world and how you channel that grief into compassion and advocacy, especially for the LGBTQ community?
I've never been asked the question in that phraseology before. We felt like we owed something to Matt to help him and his peers, his community. I would add to the grief a good deal of anger and confusion. But we began to receive a lot of mail, emails and phone calls and cards and letters asking us as accepting parents to share our story as long as the press was talking about us. We seemed to be a popular topic during that time. And of course, we were happy to do that, never understanding families who would reject their loved ones because they happen to be gay. So we were moved to do it because we cared for Matt and his friends, and we thought this was an opportunity where we could do something. Channeling our grief was actually was my survival. I had to have a reason to get out of bed every day, to have a purpose. And we were welcomed into the family, the LGBTQ family, with open arms and sharing our story. So it was through their encouragement and their love and reaching out to us that I think we felt moved that we had an opportunity to do something good. And certainly not thinking 22 years later we'd still be, doing it. People move on from one tragedy to the next, but Matt's story seemed to be the one that went on.
Absolutely. Well, what's amazing is to think back, as you said, 22 years and how it has resonated and how your advocacy has had such an unbelievable impact. Unbelievable impact. I mean, Dennis, when you look at that, and I know that early on it was like Judy was out there all the time, but when you look at the impact of what Judy has done, of what the two of you have done in your advocacy, what do you think about that? How does that move you? How does that?
Well, I'm shocked, for one thing, that it's still going on. It was a moment of courage, really, for Judy, because I went back to Saudi Arabia for 12 more years, and she being the high-scoring introvert that she is, to have the courage to get out there and start speaking in public with her first speaking engagement at the U.S. Senate. It was a real eye-opener for her. But we both had a real learning curve because we did not understand the amount of violence and discrimination and just angst against the LGBTQ community. We just assumed Matt would finish college and he would just go to work for the State Department as his dream, working overseas, right, not knowing that that's be the last possibility he would ever have. And what Judy has accomplished, boy, she's my hero, to get out there and spend all those days and months and years by herself in airports and hotels and restaurants, and then speaking to all the people that she's talked to, especially the college kids who really needed somebody like her to say, it's okay, whether they're straight or gay, it's okay. And I can't express it more than that as to what she's been able to accomplish.
Well, Dennis, you are not alone. I mean, Judy is a hero to millions of people across the globe. I mean, and what she's done and continues to do. Let me ask you both, as LGBTQ activists, and I'm not sure if you actually ever think of yourself as activists, but you are definitely activists. What can you share about how the landscape of LGBTQ plus advocacy has changed in the last decade and really since you all got engaged 22 years ago?
Well, I'll start with that. We knew in the Bush years, in W. Bush years, that no progress was going to be made through the laws or legislatively for the gay community, because W. had made it very clear when he was governor of Texas, he was going to do nothing to put forward anything that would recognize the gay community as being something that was legitimate. So we just did a lot of talking and, trying to get people to run for office and to talk to existing legislators about supporting us in what we were looking for. But we also saw in 2004 a dramatic rise in anti-gay legislation in state legislatures. It was much like we're seeing today in state legislatures with anti-trans legislation. It was the last gasp of trying to hold down the gay community, and here it is again. So I would say we've made great progress at the total, at the summation, but we had a very hard 4 years in the previous administration. The former guy just did everything he could to turn everything around on the progress that we had made. I was shocked at how easy it was for him to do that. Executive orders don't really do it. We need legislation. That's why we need the Equality Act done, passed through the Senate and just enacted. We can't keep relying on the courts to set things right for the gay community, and the Equality Act certainly would level the playing field. So yes, it has gotten better, but we're sort of retracing our steps now after the past 4 years. We have support in Congress for a while, and the president, of course, has always been a champion. So, and the vice president. So we're hopeful. State legislatures right now are what are really scaring us.
Right. Well, I think your message is basically you can't give up. You can't take anything for granted. You can have gay marriage, you can have a federal hate crimes bill, but you can't ever give up. You've got to keep working. You've got to keep pushing forward, because they'll always go ahead, Dennis.
You also have to start pushing your state legislatures to pass their own Equality Act and update their own hate crimes laws to make sure that everybody is covered and everybody is protected as equal citizens. And that's part of the problem, because they've been using the buzz term gay rights as if it's something special. This is nothing special. These are equal rights. And right now, the queer community is being treated as second-class and third-class citizens. But they're out there, they're born in this country, they're paying taxes, they have careers. Why are they not getting the same equal opportunities and chances to succeed as the straight community. To me, as a father, it's repulsive.
Right.
Also just proves the point of how important the Equality Act is. We can't live in a nation where it differs from state to state. Protections for the gay community, job protections and public accommodations. This has to be everywhere you go in the U.S. is the same.
Right. Right. Well, and you know, as we always like to say at Ford's Theater, as being Abraham Lincoln's theater, I mean, what was he central about? Equality.
Right.
You know, and at the time, you know, in Lincoln's time, we know where that equality stood. But today, Lincoln would be for equal for all people. And I think that's where he always stood, equality for all.
Well, he wouldn't be a Republican today. He'd be a Democrat.
Well, I think it's a very different Republican Party than the one that Abraham Lincoln started. I think we would both agree. Let me ask you all that. So some say that activism can involve two strands: changing hearts and minds and promoting personal growth and policy change. Talk about your work on those fronts. I mean, we've been talking about some of that here, but talk about your work on those fronts and the relationship between them for you all.
Well, when after Matt passed and Dennis went back to work, I needed something to do, and a friend said, "We think that you should go on the public speaking circuit." So that's what I did. It was storytelling. That's how you change hearts and minds. You have to humanize the issue. Right. So telling Matt's story, so many people identified with parts of it, whether they were gay or straight. The absolute ridiculous level of violence against the gay community, and Matt in particular, just raises the issue. And the straight community largely was unaware of those things because mainstream media did never talk about it in a way that was honest and true. It was always the National Enquirer-esque version of what the gay community really was. Mainstream media was about gay pride and the AIDS pandemic, negative all around. So when we started talking about Matt and the community at large, also including all the marginalized communities, to humanize the story changes hearts and minds. And I think just the natural following of that is changes in policy. Raising awareness about an issue creates the understanding of the need for policy change. So, and we did that, you know, making friends with existing politicians and people of influence. That's kind of how it works. One followed, well, at least it did for us. One followed the other.
Right.
Well, there's a lot of work being done under the table during the Bush years. It's the grassroots. They're working at that time. They should still be doing that kind of thing, working in their local communities, gathering support, and then electing legislators and local politicians who are supportive of those issues. Because a lot of those legislators eventually went into national politics. Right. So that gave them the grounds that they needed to work up the line. And so for 10 years, they were doing grassroots. And when President Obama came into office, it was time. And by that time, people had started to realize that there's really no difference between the straight community and the gay community other than who you love and what business is it of yours, what happens in the bedroom. And you're seeing that support now. Now you have, 60% of the people think there should be equal rights. 70+% or 80% now are in favor or happy with same-sex marriage.
Right,
so
exactly.
You've got to start low. At the same time, you're electing the people that you want, but you still have to keep getting out there, as Judy said, and tell your stories, make people realize that the gay community is just as boring as the straight community. They all work, they all have careers, they have families, they have jobs, they have mortgages. There's no difference in the two.
Right, absolutely. Well, you mentioned Barack Obama, and President Obama is the one who signed the Matthew Shepard, James Byrd Hate Crimes Prevention Act in 2009, which has been so instrumental. What, from your perspective, has the impact of that legislation been?
Well, it's allowed the feds to step in if a local jurisdiction will not prosecute a hate crime or are unable to. They are also can be invited by the local jurisdiction to help. Prior to the 2009 bill, the gay community was not at all included in hate crime legislation. It was only race, religion, and national origin
Right.
that was passed during the civil rights era. This now does gender identity, the gay community, disability, expands the parameter. So it's increased and made it easier for federal law to be used, I guess, and it's been successfully used.
Right.
But it is in no way gives, nor do the feds want priority in these cases. Oftentimes, states' laws are better equipped to handle the situation than the feds. So
Right.
it just was, as we called it when we were lobbying for it, it was a backstop measure.
And the thing that's interesting is when they started doing the Shepard Bird Act, everybody started screaming, you know, the sky is falling, the sky is falling, because they signed that bill. Well, nothing happened. It was there to protect everybody. So, but it gave the impetus that because of that, don't ask, don't tell was removed. And when we weren't invaded by every country in the world because our military was still effective, it should have been job discrimination next and then marriage, but they flipped.
Right.
And the thing is, it doesn't matter that they flipped. It's the fact that people are realizing everybody's the same. We're all different, and that should be a good thing, not a bad thing. And we should be celebrating that.
Well, I want to say, I think one of the things, and Judy, I've heard you say this for years, and it's always heartwarming for me. You said, I'm a storyteller. You go out and tell your story, and what you both do is you humanize these things, because you're right, Dennis. Everyone thinks like, oh, that's that big, horrible, awful thing over there. And what the two of you do is go out there and sort of make it human, put it on a human nature and say, no, these are our sons and daughters, our brothers and sisters, our families. And this is why we need these protections.
Right, exactly. It's about the people you care about. This isn't about strangers. These are about your family and friends. And if you think that you haven't already worked with and loved people of the gay community, then you're just not paying attention. You've always done that. You just didn't know that you do that.
Right.
But you've always been around gay people and loved and worked with them and no problem. But now that you know the gay, that's a problem.
Right.
Don't really get it. Don't really get
it. And the fact that you reject your child, 5 seconds ago, you loved your child. Suddenly the child says, I'm LGBT, and they kick him out. How could you do that?
Right.
When we talk about Matt, we describe Matt. Matt was our son who happened to be gay. He was not our gay son. Right. He was our son first. Being gay was just like the fact that he had blue eyes and blonde hair. It's something that is part of him. It's not a choice. It's not a lifestyle. It's the way he is, just like I am the way I am, lovable.
Charming, debonair.
but everybody is different, and these are the characteristics you're born with.
Right.
So it's not a lifestyle. It's not a choice. You are who you are. And let's just accept it. Move on to more important matters.
Right. Well, you raise a great point there, and actually we got a question from one of our listeners. They ask, have parents who had previously rejected their LGBTQ children reached out to you, and how have you learned from them? Or more importantly, how have you been able to help them accept their children?
I'd have to say that has not happened to us on an individual level. Well, I don't really know why. The PFLAG is really where they should go. That's the parental support group. That's where they should go. We have heard from parents families who previously had rejected their children, who now welcome them back into their family. We have heard how our story has changed parents' minds about how they think about their kids. So that's gratifying, but on an individual basis, that just hasn't happened. No one has reached out to us other than to express their grief at our loss and their gratitude for us continuing to speak out. But if they've rejected their child, they're not going to want to talk to us.
Yeah, a lot of times too, there's a sense of regret either from the parents or from the child, because it took so long to finally meet and understand each other and accept each other as parents and children. So that's part of it too. And Judy talks about the fact a lot of times that it's hard for kids to come out because they just don't know how they're going to be accepted, even though they may be what is considered an accepting family. But every story is different, and every attitude, every part of it. And I just don't know why we have to come. I didn't have to announce to my folks in front of family and everybody that I was straight.
Right.
And I think it's just who you are. I don't think we have to do all this, all this. Just accept them and go about your business.
Right. Well, a lot of more stubborn parents, Dennis, could learn a lot from you and Judy, and just about this. Like as you said, we're all people. Let me ask you something. I'm curious that there's been, over the last 10 plus years or so, there's been a real a sort of rise in young trans kids hate crimes, young trans kids suicides. I feel like this is sort of a new frontier, if it were, as in part of the LGBTQ sort of movement. What is your thoughts on? And I'm sure in the last 22 years you've seen sort of the change in that, and I sort of feel sometimes these young trans people are, especially young people, are in such a difficult position. I'm just sort of curious if you have any sort of thoughts about that or have had any interactions in that respect.
Well, to start with, when we got into this work 20 plus years ago, there were members of the LGBT community
Right.
who did not regard T as part of their community. So that was a battle all to start with. Also, in the last 20 years, there has been the development of vocabulary, of language, to talk about what it means to be trans. Right. There's been a clarification of what that is. And I think it's always been here, but I don't think there was a way to talk about it or a way to express yourself or the least level of acceptance.
And it's been medically accepted now too and recognized.
Yeah, so in far more than it used to be. So the idea that people now are out and trans and talking about it has raised the issue, but it has also shined a light on the level of violence and discrimination on the trans community. Not that that's a new thing, it's just that now we are aware.
Right.
We are aware. And so just like they did in 2004 in the gay community at large, not so much T, but this is the last gasp of the bias against the gay community and trans.
Yep.
The battle is essentially over. We are getting equal rights for the community, and those who don't want us to have that, this is their last gasp. So they're just striking out, making laws at the state level that don't cover anything, where there's no issue.
Right.
So it's their bias just poking their nose right where it has no business being.
Right.
But it's gotten better. It has gotten better. There's an understanding. There's a language of pronouns now that's accepted. Bathrooms that are not gender identified, and so all those things. But they come with their own baggage right now. Yeah. But at least we're talking about it.
Yep. No, go ahead.
The public. Well, we have an education problem. We have an education problem for the straight community and the LGBT community as to who the trans community is and what they're going through. We can't understand that. We're satisfied with who we are,
Right.
and that you're in the wrong body. That can be understood, but it takes education and patience.
Right.
And it takes patience also on the trans side. When people are asking questions and making mistakes, they have to have the patience to allow those mistakes to be made and then correct them politely instead of just saying, "Oh, you homophobe," and walking away. So it works on both sides, and something needs to be done to better educate everybody so the acceptance becomes norm.
You know, Dennis, that you are so right on that. I think that especially trans, and you know, to sort of touch on what you said, Judy, you're right. 22 years ago, I'm not sure the LGBT community was sort of so open about trans. It was foreign. It was like, what does that mean? And we don't care who you sleep with, and just this. But as you said, Dennis, it's really about it's not about sexuality. It's about gender. It's about, you know, being in the wrong body. And what does that mean? And I think you're right about the communities themselves have to be open to this education, because the only way we change hearts and minds is actually to try and educate people and trying to get people to understand. I mean, I have a young trans niece who is about 12 years old now, and she started changing her identity when she was about 9 or so, 7. And at the time, I sort of thought, like, I don't understand this. But I did a lot of reading and I did research. And, you know, it's amazing the difference between LGB issues and trans issues. And yet we're all under the big pride umbrella, and we need to welcome all parts of our community and embrace that and educate that and fight for the equality of everyone. And I think that's the key as we move forward.
The trans community now is the bugaboo, the monster underneath the bed that we all grew up with as kids. And, you know, the adults are using it just so they have some issues to talk about. And a lot of people can't understand why.
And much of that comes about through ignorance, right, Dennis? They just don't know. So what they do is they demonize it. You're right. It's the bugaboo under the bed. We don't understand it. It's evil. It's bad. And yet they're just ignorant about it.
And they don't want to try and educate themselves, which is even more frustrating.
Exactly. Well, let's move on a little. We got another question from one of our listeners who said, and this is a wild question, a big open question. What have you learned, or how have you changed through your activism over the last 20 years?
Well, one thing I've learned, you probably knew it before I started, was that you are not going to make people learn something they don't want to learn. The old adage, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, just was proved to me over and over and over again. People who remain willfully ignorant, you know, that's ignorance is our enemy and always will be. But if you don't even care and you don't want to, try to figure out what is happening to your friends and neighbors, family, then that's just bad. That is just bad. But you can't make them learn. They have to want to. So sometimes it takes a personal experience, like a friend coming out or a relative, to make you go investigate the issue. But if it doesn't involve you personally, some, maybe most, I don't know, just check out.
Yep, I think you're right.
The thing I learned most is there are a lot of people who do care. They're Lyndon Johnson's silent majority. You have the loud naysayers on one end and the loud activists supporting LGBTQ movement on the other end. But the silent majority in the middle, especially today with social media the way it is, as evil as it is in some instances, it scares people. They want to support and they'll be willing to do it on a vote, but they don't want to go out there and publicly start taking a stance where others can come back and threaten and them or their family or their career or whatever it might be. And that's part of the problem with the Equality Act. We have 30 states, you'd be fired for being gay. So why would you take a stance? You lose your family, your career, your home, everything. So it puts a little bit more pressure on everybody to make change. And that's the thing I learned is it's going to be slow and it's going to be hard. And we have to go after the deadheads who don't want to learn and
Right.
do what they can to support this community in this country.
Right. And you just have to stick with it. And I think that you both are proof to that. I want to turn a little now to talk about theater. In the fall of 2013, Ford's presented a production of the play based on the Laramie, Wyoming community's reaction to Matthew Shepard's death. The Laramie Project and Ford's production coincided with the 15th anniversary of Matthew's death. That production for many, many people at Ford's Theater, myself including, was probably one of the most profound theatrical experiences we've ever had. Now, I know for the two of you, and Judy, I bet you can't even count the number of Laramie Project productions you've seen over the years. But Dennis, there is a rumor that the Ford's Theater production that we did at the time, and you came to see it, was the first time that you were able to actually sit through the entire production of the play. Is that true?
Yes, sir. I was in Saudi Arabia up until the end of 2009, so I was not given the opportunity. And then with what we were doing in other areas, the production was never close by until that night.
Right.
And it was amazing because I went from the airport, National Airport, into to the theater in less than 10 minutes because there's a government shutdown, so there's no traffic.
Well, let me set the stage for that, because that was not only was it a like unbelievable experience, but on top of just the general experience that the Laramie Project is, it was the 2013 federal government shutdown that happened on opening night. So opening night, we were not able to perform the show in the theater. So we moved the show to the Woolly Mammoth Theater, one of our colleague theaters downtown, to their rehearsal room that was for like 120 people and mostly the press. But then through, sort of divine intervention, we were able to move the production up the street 2 blocks to the Universalist Christian Church, who are, sort of our gay friends and neighbors in the Universalist Church up the street, and said, bring the production to our sanctuary, where we performed for 2 weeks there, including on the 15th anniversary of Matthew's death. And that's when you came in, Dennis. We had Westboro Baptist Church protesters outside, and you marched right through them. And you came into the theater, and we had a vigil that was scheduled for after the performance. And I got up on stage after the performance and I said, well, I'm just waiting for the company, but I understand that they are all backstage with Dennis Shepard, who is congratulating them on their performance because it's the first show he's seen of the production. So that was where we got to your seeing the show.
Yeah, it was quite memorable. It brought a lot of flashbacks about Matt and different things, but it was an amazing show. And the best part about the Laramie Project is it really didn't involve us. It involved the residents of Laramie and their attitudes. And then they did the second follow-up play called Laramie Project 10 Years Later, where they went back and interviewed a lot of the same people. But the most important thing about that play, as Judy mentions a lot, is that if you take out the issues of the LGBTQ community and you put in race or religion, it's the same play. It's all about prejudice and discrimination, and and how it impacts everybody. But it's something I will never forget, that night, sitting there and watching it and having the chance to thank the cast and crew for the incredible job that they did.
Now, Dennis, do you remember you had a very special tie on that night?
Yes, I had on one of Matt's ties. Special occasions, I always like to wear one of his ties because that way it feels like he's with me.
Yeah. It was a very special night. And Judy, you were with us all over that production. I know we had a wonderful Q&A conversation with you and Cokie Roberts on the stage, and we had various other events surrounding our production. But one of the truly remarkable things that we did, and you alluded to this earlier in the conversation, Judy, about the letters and cards and well wishes that you got after Matthew's attack and after his passing. And we worked with the two of you and a team from Ford's Theater. 4 of our top-notch staff came up to your place in Wyoming and spent a week going through all of these cards and letters addressed to your family in the wake of Matthew's attack and death. And we created an exhibit called Not Alone, The Power of Response. And there's a photograph of it there. And this included letters and drawings and personalized cards from school-age children, secular and religious groups, Coretta Scott King, celebrities and political leaders, all exploring the themes of empathy, community, response, and personal responsibility. Yeah. Our team members remember the play and the exhibit so meaningful. And in fact, I was talking to Jake and Alex this last week just about putting that together. And I know that it was, I hope that it was meaningful for the two of you as well. And I know we worked to create something that we were able to pass along to the foundation so that they could have something to take as a kind of traveling exhibit. And Judy, before I ask you about your take of all of this, I'll never forget your response, because I was with you when we went to look at the exhibit. And it was one of the most moving critiques and fast critiques I've ever gotten for any artistic creation. I took you upstairs and you walked in, and within about 5 seconds, you turned back around and you said to me, "It's wonderful. I can't look at it." And that moved me beyond words, because what it said to me was, we captured something that was so powerful. It was there for everyone else, and you trusted it to go.
I absolutely did, and I never went through all those cards and letters. I couldn't do it, so it was beautiful.
Well, Dennis, you got to see it as well. I think it was, to this day, I always tell the staff, I said, I only can talk about it a little bit because I always get choked up myself whenever I think about it. And it was an extraordinary exhibit. It was an extraordinary opportunity, which I thank you both for allowing us and trusting us to take that and present it out there.
Well, there certainly was never a question that we would not trust you to take care of it. So thank you for that. It was lovely, it was respectful, and very meaningful to everybody who saw it. So thank you.
Well, that's the important thing. It showed the variety of sentiment from around the country and around the world, from different people, straight and gay, as to how meaningful this was, what the impact of Matt's beating and subsequent death meant to them, and a lot of requests to push ahead and try and make change.
Right. Right. Well, and I know, sometimes we talk about, as we've been talking through this conversation, sometimes people need to sort of see the connection to themselves personally or
Mhm.
see it in black and white. And I think some of what that exhibit was able to do is share with people and say, this is not something you read about over there. This is something that really happened. And here, this is witness to it. It's sort of witness and testifying, which can be so powerful.
Right.
Let me ask you something also, just not just about the Ford's experience, but the sort of Laramie Project in general. And I love what you said about it because it really is about the people of Laramie. And just like you said, if you take Matt out, and it could be about sort of a race issue or a religious issue, but the other thing is you could take out Laramie, and it could be any community in the world and how they respond. There is a certain universality to the project that is pretty amazing and pretty potent. And I presume you guys feel that and find that out and probably hear that when you travel around the globe.
Well, we do, and we hear from the Tectonic, the Moises Kaufman, who did the Laramie Project, who wrote it,
Right.
that it's being performed in Milan this week, and it was secretly performed in Uganda in 2019. It's been around the world, and
Kathmandu.
yeah, and even in the year of the COVID in 2020, it was in the top 20 of plays produced virtually.
Wow.
So, that just tells you the impact and the reach of this work. It's truly brilliant, truly brilliant.
Yeah, that's great.
And the best part of it is when they have a talk back after the show between some speakers or the cast and crew and the audience, so they can bring up issues and clarify for those who are, straddling the fence. They don't know which way to go, and that has really been effective also in networking and bringing out issues and needs.
Right. Well, also, it's just wonderful. I mean, quite candidly, it's great for the foundation as well. It's wonderful for the foundation to have that out there and for people to be talking about it, to keep up, the support and allow people an avenue to continue to support the work that you all are doing all over the globe. I want to ask you something. You talked about something earlier before we actually started when we were in the green room. You talked about that you were doing some FBI and DOJ training. I presume that has to do around hate crimes, but I'm curious to just talk a little bit about that. I think it'd be great for our listeners to hear about, it's not just advocacy, it's not just work out there. You're actually working with law enforcement and prosecutors. Tell us a little about what that's like.
Right. So the Shepard-Byrd Act, one of the fatal flaw was that it did not require reporting. So there was scattered reporting across the nation's cities, Houston saying they had no hate crimes, Miami, Honolulu. We know those places have hate crimes, but it was never required of them to do it either federally or statewide or locally. So in this legislative session, there was a bill introduced regarding COVID-19 related hate crimes against the Asian American Pacific Islander community. So there was a bill in Congress and another bill called Jabara Hire related to a hate crime that happened to the Jabara family in Kansas and Heather Hire in Charlottesville.
Right.
And this bill addresses the issue of reporting and funding for training, which is sorely lacking for law enforcement agencies. So now that we have a new administration and a new leadership at DOJ, across the board at DOJ, civil rights has now become a priority again. In the previous administration, it just got doors shut on civil rights, and so now it's back in motion, and it's a priority. So FBI is starting up their training for regionally for community organizations, prosecutors, FBI folks, law enforcement, to talk about what the new acts actually can do. So in addition to Shepard-Byrd. So we're part of that. The part we are is storytelling.
Great.
We humanize the issue for the people that are there. Otherwise, it's sort of an abstract thing, right? So that's the purpose of having us there. We're so happy to see it back. It makes it much easier for everyone to understand what hate crimes are, and how they are treated. So it's really important work.
We did numerous hate crimes training under the guise of the DOJ and the FBI under the Obama administration. Mm-hmm. So this is just a renewal of that after 4-year hiatus when hate crimes weren't considered important. But now they're gearing up fast to get it out there and educate everybody so that the prosecutors and law enforcement know about the law and what they have to do to prosecute and what they can and can't do in prosecution. But the general public, the NGOs and citizens as a whole are made aware of the fact that there are laws out there now that will protect them and are there for their benefit, and they should know what they are and how to report a hate crime or how to follow through to make sure one is investigated.
Wow, that's wonderful. I'm thrilled that you guys are doing that work. I really am. It makes me, it just makes me feel great about that work being done to know that you're both involved. As we've got a few more minutes left here, but I want to ask you all, as there's been this sort of like, there's an uptick of this sort of bullying of young people, cyberbullying. What would you tell a young LGBTQ plus person who is struggling with being bullied today? And what would you recommend as a resource?
Wow. So what we've discovered about social media is technology moved much quicker than regulation. And there's just no way to deal with. So when I was a kid, when you left the schoolyard, bullying was done. Now it follows you 24/7.
Right.
There's no way to get away from it. Even kids changing schools doesn't work. So you need to document things that come into you. You need to talk about it. Don't deal with it on your own. I know kids are reluctant to tell their parents that things are happening because they don't want their folks to worry. But you need to talk about it because it's the only way you're going to address the issue. That the issue is not you. The issue is them.
Right.
They are the ones with the problem, not you. And the issue of bullying, schools need to address the problems of the bully. The bully is a bully for a reason. And just sending him home for 2 weeks just doesn't work.
Right.
They're coming back with the same baggage. So why are they acting this way? Don't put the onus on the victim. Put the onus on the bully and figure out exactly what's happening. Zero tolerance just doesn't work.
Right.
But the main thing is you just can't keep that into yourself. You need to tell responsible, trusted adults that this is happening to you. And trust them that they're going to figure out a solution. I honestly don't know that there's a solution. Regulation just has to catch up with social media. It's brilliant sometimes. I see the support videos on TikTok, but I also see the hateful ones.
Yeah.
It's such a dichotomy.
Yep. Well, and our team also just said that they're putting resources in the chat as well.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
So that's terrific. Now, let me ask you all something. I want to turn back to the personal. I want to turn back to Matt. Matt was interred at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. in 2018. Why was that important to the two of you?
Well, so many reasons. I don't know that you know this, Paul, but all the cards and letters are now at the Smithsonian. They came to our house. They were building a collection of LGBT memorabilia. They came to our house, much like y'all did, and took stuff back with them for the exhibits through the collection. And while they were here, one of the representatives said, "We know that you have Matt's ashes and are reluctant to do anything with them other than keep them to yourselves because you're worried about defacing the
Right.
marker or
Right.
you know, something like that. So he said, have you ever considered the National Cathedral? And we're like, yeah, no, it's the National Cathedral. We don't go there. I don't even know that they do, you know, a crematorium or I mean, a crypt or anything like that.
Right.
So he said, no, I really think you should consider it. It seems appropriate to me. So I emailed Gene Robinson, who is a friend of ours, and I said, what do you think? And he said, this is the perfect solution. I'm going to contact the folks at the cathedral and we're going to work this out. So it was a wonderful coincidence to have all these things sort of happen at the same time. Matt was Episcopalian. I'm Episcopalian. Dennis is too. He loved the church. I'm not sure it was because of the theater of the church. But anyway, he was very much about it. And now he's in church all the time. It was a brilliant solution. And it was a way, now folks have a place to go if they want to visit Matt. And it was a win-win for the cathedral too. It only solidified their welcoming stance for the community.
Yep.
It was a brilliant, beautiful occasion.
It was, you know, to me, there's nothing better when you can have, you know, you all have been waiting 20 years and the sort of all the things line up, all the angels come together, all the stars align. And I agree with you. It's perfect. Matt has become a national symbol over all of these years and an international symbol. And for him to be in Washington, D.C., a place where, you know, the Hate Crimes Act was signed, where people can come, and where that advocacy is so critical and so important, I think it's really wonderful. And I think it's incredibly generous of the two of you to agree to it and agree to have that in Washington, D.C.
Actually, we were very selfish doing it in that we didn't know what to do with his ashes. We thought about scattering them, but then our other son said, no, I need to have his ashes someplace where I can go visit.
Right.
And this solved the problem for us in a way that takes the burden away from our other son. And it also allows, as Judy said, others to come and sit and contemplate their friends, their family, their own lives, and Matt and what it all means, and in a quiet place of respect for everybody who enters.
And the cathedral's made such wonderful accommodations. For a while, I don't know what it's going to be like post-COVID, but pre-COVID, if you went to the cathedral to visit Matt and you told them at the desk, you could go down for free. You didn't have to buy one of the tour tickets. You could just go down to the crypt, and it's not easy to find. I got to say that. They were very accommodating and welcoming, very kind, compassionate. It was a wonderful experience.
Well, it's, again, thank you both. And you know, that sort of is wrapping up our conversation here today. And I just can't thank the two of you enough for your advocacy for the community, for your friendship to Fords, and for helping us celebrate Pride Month here at Fords Theater. So, ladies and gentlemen, Judy and Dennis Shepard, two of the nicest, hardest working people in the country. And I really thank you both so much for being with us today and your friendship. It means a lot to me personally. Thank you.
It does to us as well. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, Forest Theater is not friendship, it's family. So you have to do what the family tells you to do. So here we are, so we can see all of you again and tell everybody hi.
So nice to see you.
Thank you. To everyone watching, we hope that you enjoyed our conversation. We'll continue to respond to your Facebook and Twitter comments and questions that we didn't get during our live session today. Please consider making a financial gift to Fords Theater to help support our mission and work. You may do so at fords.org/donate. We hope you'll join us again in September for our next cabinet conversation. You can also catch up on previous programs on www.fords.org. Until then, stay safe and well. See you next time.
Happy Pride.